For today, guys, we're going to start our next chapter in Managerial, and I just want to make sure that we're ready for our due dates for Chapter 11. If I go to our class materials section, Chapter 11, what we have due today is the concept clips. A lot of you are done already. And then after that, a week from today, we'll have our assignments all due. We are done with the TSA requirement for Managerial. It was just the Chapter 9 assignment. And our test will be then a week from Wednesday, right? So those are the dates that we're shooting for. Chapter 11 then is another management requirement. If you're in management, we're going to have to do some performance reviews. It's part of the nature of the beast. So we'll cover some things that we can look at financially as to how well that person did perform. There's also a discussion on decentralization, concept or terminology used to describe how our company is, what I want to say, how our company is formed within. How do we make decisions? So the company profile here for Chapter 11 is Herman Miller. And they were able to use a management ratio called EVA, and we'll talk about EVA, in reducing their inventory cost, economic value added. And it talks about that in that article there, to how they used it and how they were able to turn a loss into a profitable company during a downturn. Now, Herman Miller is important to Green Bay because they are a direct competitor to KI. So they make office furniture like KI, and you can see that in the photo on page 590. So if you get a chance, take a look at it, and that kind of gives you some of the things that we'll be covering in Chapter 11. So we're going to start with our definitions. Obviously, with any chapter, we start new. Decentralization, also talk about responsibility centers, and how do we make decisions. So with a decentralized organization, we want to make the decisions at a lower level in our organization. And the main reason we would want to do that, in a lot of cases, the lower level manager has the most accurate information. And it's much quicker. We don't have to get an answer from somebody higher up, so to speak. So with competition in today's world, a lot of our larger companies, we can't be centralized. We have to be decentralized to make those quick, most correct decisions at the site. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. So they talk about decentralization on page 592 through 593. And there are types, and there's a photograph here or picture on page 592. So what I'd like you to do is use this as a guide on those questions on the test, comparing the two. The opposite of decentralization is centralized, where top management makes a majority of the decision. So the decisions are made from up here and they're carried down, as opposed to decentralization, the decisions are made at a much lower level. Sydney, can you close that door, please? Thank you. There are types of decentralization. Oh, I should cover this. Reasons on page 592. We talked about some of these. We have more local information, which is more accurate. And also, it provides training and motivation for managers to work their way up into the organization. I saw on 60 Minutes one time where the CEO of McDonald's was actually a line cook at one point during his career as he moved up through the organization. So that's kind of the goal here with this process of organization. So now the types. We can organize our decentralization by the good or service we're providing. And they talk about in here the PepsiCo. They own not only Pepsi, they own Taco Bell, or they used to. Frito-Lay, Gatorade, they show those types of goods that they provide. Geographic lines, we're talking the airline industry. They're organized by area. So we have a North American division, South American division, and so forth. So geographic areas, Europe, Asia. And then finally, responsibility centers are very defined specific parts of our organization. They can be as small as a sales office, within our organization. So again, different types, depends on the industry that you're in, which one works better for that particular industry. So the examples are on page 594, geographic, and they're pretty self-explanatory. Geographic lines, again, pretty self-explanatory. But then when we get to the responsibility center, and this is on page 594 as well, we can define into 4 categories the 4 different types of responsibility centers, starting with cost. And in this case, we are only concerned about cost. So when we look at these, we want to define what is the manager responsible for. What is the manager responsible for? Is it just our cost? So a maintenance manager would fit in this category. We have lots of maintenance managers here. We have the heat, right? We have vehicle. We have, in this organization, maybe IT, right? Computers and so forth. And we can go down into the revenue center. Here we're looking at just the sales of a particular area of the company. Is it sales for Pepsi? Is it sales for a division? Is it sales for a whole company? It can be whatever range that you would like. And as we progress down, right, the responsibility increases. Then we head to profit. Well, now I'm responsible for net income, which means then I'm responsible for both sales and expenses. So a lot more responsibility. So here again, we could be the P&G division, Procter & Gamble division in Green Bay is competing against the Procter & Gamble one in, let's say, Georgia or Oklahoma. And that's, again, much more responsibility. And then finally, the investments. It's basically everything, including investments in equipment and building. So your job here on the exam for those multiple choice questions is know the type and then the 4 types here, and then know exactly how much they're responsible for. Cost is obviously just the expenses. Sales is or revenue is just the sales, and so forth. Know the difference between the 4. Because again, we don't want to yell at our manager in our maintenance department over some sales dollars, right? We got to be careful of what they are responsible for. There is a chart on page 595 which just shows the difference as far as what they're responsible for. But again, know for the exam the difference between them. Also know of the decisions that are made by a certain manager can affect other managers. So that's what this word means, interdependence. So be aware of that. Again, if I'm cutting costs in my department, in my maintenance department, that's great. But in a long-term fashion, that might hurt my profits if something terribly does go wrong. So, and then that would hurt the other manager who is overseeing profits. So they're all interrelated, interdependent upon one another. So let's practice as our first task here, guys. Identifying which one's a cost, revenue, profit, or investment type organization or responsibility center. Example 25. On page 633.
You don't have this one printed for us.
I don't?
No.
Oh, rude
It
of me.
starts with
Sorry.
example 26.
Okay, so it's not in your packet. If you could just write in the book or on a note, because this is one of the requirements on the exam. Or on the back of a sheet, you could do that too, if there's room somewhere. It doesn't take much room. There's only 5 of them. 633. Terrence, the plant manager for the laser printer factory of someplace. 2 machines had broken down and some factory production workers were idle for part of the month. Materials prices increased and insurance premiums on the factory increased. No way out of it, costs were going up. He hoped that the marketing vice president would be able to push through some price increases, but that really wasn't his department. So, of the 4 types of responsibility, what is Taryn responsible for?
What did he give you? Revenue?
We're not talking revenue. What is, he's concerned about revenue, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Brianna, I think you said cost, right? Yeah, Carla said to cost. I agree, that should be a cost center type. Yep, I think that's the best choice here. In letter B, what does ROI mean? Once in a while you'll see that on...
Return on investments?
Yeah, return on investment.
Investment.
It's a ratio, right? What does it mean? Or how do I compute it? Anybody remember return on investment?
Operating income divided by average operating assets.
Yes. Operating income. And we'll cover that shortly. Divided by average
Operating assets.
operating assets. So basically it means how much profit am I making off my equipment, right? How much revenue, not revenue, that's sales, how much profit, operating income am I making on my investment? So if I'm making 10%, then I can find another investment that makes 15%, what should I do? Take the 15, right? And get rid of the 10. So that's what companies are doing, is looking at their returns to see, are they adequate enough for what I want to accomplish? So it's looking at that, and Joanna would be then which one of the four? If this is her responsibility, watching that ratio, which one of the four is best suited for this? Investment, yeah. So this is an investment type responsibility center. Because I have both profit in mind, which is sales and revenue. Very good, Michaela, thank you. And it's also got assets, the investments involved. How much dollars in investments? C. What's his concern? They sound very mean, don't they? Is this a good functioning organization? It doesn't sound like it. But what is his concern? Just
Is it revenue?
Just the revenue, yeah. Yeah, Michaela, you're right. Revenue. Or sales, right? Sales manager is concerned with revenue center. Susan, looking at letter D. Yeah, we're getting down to the end here. Profit, very good, Michaela. Which isn't good again, right? In disgust. Revenue was down, costs were up. What a combination. Talk about a bad day, I agree. And then finally, letter E. Yeah, back to investment, I agree. Then we'll talk about, again, we're getting back to the return on investment in this analysis. Getting rid of obsolete equipment, bringing in new equipment to hopefully improve our performance, right? So we'll be dealing with those shortly. Good. So that's our task starting off in Chapter 11. We want to, again, when we're doing performance reviews, the goal is that we are assessing that person based on what they're responsible for. So I'm going to put that here. The goal here is performance eval on what they are responsible for. What area are they responsible for? All right, so there's some page 595, how it's used is defined here. So you can do that reading on your own if you so choose. And now we come up to our first computation. ROI. It's, again, a very common ratio done by many companies to judge manager performance. It's defined here. It's the profit earned on every dollar of investment. So here we have our dollar of investment on the bottom and our profit on top. So we already talked about this in our investment center discussion. It is, again, a very common measurement to judge performance. So the example is on page 596. And this ratio can be different between companies or operations, depends on what they're used to. But most common, this is how it's done. They also talk about an average. And if we look at a balance sheet at the beginning of the year, and our balance sheet for assets at the end of the year, we take a snapshot at both beginning and end, we add them together, and that gives us an average of assets we held in our possession throughout the year. Now, the assets have to be operating assets for this ratio, which means cash, receivables, inventories, land, buildings, and equipment used in our operation. It does not include non-operating assets. Can someone give me an example of a non-operating asset for a company? I can think of one, basically. Non-operating. Operating means we use it in our operation, right? From intermediate, does anybody remember what non-operating asset would be? Thoughts out there in TV land? Guys at home, Do you have any idea? Non-operating? Carla. Okay, thank you, Carla. Thanks. It's actually investments in other companies. It even could be land that we have not used in operation. So, for instance, I might have bought land as a investment, right? So it's those things that we have in our possession that are not really operational. Goodwill, right? Patents, those type of things are considered non-operational. Okay, so we only want to include the operational assets in our ROI measurement. Now, the book then goes on page 597, 598, computing the return on investment using two other ratios. So first ratio is margin. The next ratio is turnover. So here's our second ratio, which is turnover. And together they give us return on investment. So if you look on page, not in book, okay, I guess not. So here we go. Margin, let's define that first. Maybe I can put it here. Margin is what? Is operating income over sales, right? Look at our income statement. There's a margin percentage. This is a percent, margin percent. And turnover is equal to sales divided by average operating assets again. So if I multiply these two together, if I multiply my margin percentage times turnover, I get what? I get ROI, which is operating income over average assets. So that's where it comes from, these two ratios. So you can cross out the sales in both, and what do you end up with is this ROI, operating income over assets. So we're looking at basically two ratios in one, and that's some of the reasons why it's so popular. Because I can look at, in this ROI, I can look at sales, I can look at expenses, and I can look at assets, all in one number. So that's all formed in this one particular number. So that's what makes it very beneficial. So we're going to try one here, exercise 1. In the book, I just showed it here, so I didn't went through all that work for nothing. But that's okay, it's not in the book. Here we're looking at exercise 1. This is on page 597, 598. Shows an income statement. Awesome. And then also it shows us our balance sheet numbers needed. Our beginning value was $277,000 in assets, operating assets. The ending value is 323. So in our ratio then, we have to first find the average assets. They then give us our margin, 10%. They then compute our turnover, 1.6. And then what is our ROI? Multiply them together, 16%. And guess what? They did it directly and they got the same percentage, 16%. So the computation's easy. My concern now is, what does the 10% mean? My first question, what does the 10% mean? I know it's the margin, that's great. Well, if the boss who's not an accountant asks you, okay, 10%, what does that mean? How would you define that? Anybody know? Those at home, what does margin mean? Can someone Google it? No. Just kidding. You could, in case you forget. Anybody at home? It's very quiet. Oh, Carla. What's she gonna say? I'm kind of anxious. Margin is more, it's a profit number, right? And it's a relationship of profit to sales. And you can see that in our number, right? Here's our income number, here's our sales number. So if I were looking at 10%, we make 10% profit on every dollar of sales. So if my sales for the month were $2, how much would I make in profit? 20 cents, right? $3, I make 30 cents. So that's what margin means. Now, turnover means it's 1.6 every dollar spent on assets generates $1.6 in sales. So every dollar of asset, I generate $1.6 in sales. These two, margin and turnover, are also just as important as ROI. Okay? So, is 1.6 a pretty good number? What do you think? It's not bad. Is 2 better than 1.6? 2 is better than 1.6. Because I get that question. Larger the number, the better the operation. If I can generate $3 or $4 in sales in every dollar investment, that's pretty cool. Same is true here. Margin. If I have 20% versus 10, 20 is better than 10. 30 is better than 20. So that's the role of this number, is to measure performance again. All right, so let's try one. Exercise 26. Let's see how we do here. This one is in your packet. We first have to compute the income, which is pretty simple. just a subtraction. And what do we have for income? $7.5 million, right? Awesome. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you. 7.5 million. That's our first answer. Compute our margin. And I put next to each question the ratio, just so that we don't forget. So it's simply our income, 7.5 million, divided by our sales, 25 million, gives me a margin of what? 30-something%?
30.
Is it 30? So what does that mean again? 30% means for every dollar of sales, I'm making what? 30 cents, right. $1 of sales equals 30 cents of profit. This would be sweet. That's pretty good. Most companies like Walmart earn that 1 to 2% profit range. Low, very low margins. All right, turnover. I think they gave us the average assets, 10 million. So it's our sales of 25 million. Our assets were 10 million?
Yeah.
Is that what it is? 2.5. Now, turnover is not a percent number. It's just a number, right? 2.5. So then we can what? We can multiply the 30% times the 2.5. So I'm going to do that now. And that will give us our return on investment of, correct, 75%, right? Or, if I wanted to, right, I could take my profit of 7.5 million, divide it by my average operating assets of 10 million, and I get the same answer. So for every dollar of investment, of asset investment, we make 75 cents. We make 75 cents per year, right? Because this hopefully would continue on every year with those same number of assets. Now, if I can make 75% on my assets, that's extremely good. So what's the market bearing right now? It's bearing that, on average, they think 5 to 7%. So if you had $10,000, would you invest it in this company versus the market? And if I can make 75% versus 5 to 7%, yes, I would certainly invest in this company. So that's how people understand whether or not to invest in a company, right? They look at this return on investment and wow, they're doing super. So I would certainly be more willing to invest this were the ratio. All right. There is another one, 27. Let's just quickly do this and then we'll take our first break. Because here we actually have to compute the average operating assets. So last year, Elway had 28 million. 300,000. I'm going to add. That was the beginning. The ending was 23,700,000. Divided by 2. And what do we have there? Is it around 25? $26 million. Nice even number. So that's our answer, 26 million. Compute the margin. Income over sales, right? You notice on the income statement, they only go up to operating income. Over sales. It's over 10%. 15. Margin is usually always as a percent, right? The number is always a percent. Turnover. Oops. I need 3 more zeros. I didn't lose a digit there, did I? I'm good, I think. 40 times. Really? 40 it is. Holy cow. That's incredible. All right. Thanks, Carla. So our ROI is income over assets. The income was 156 million over our assets of 26 million, which is what? Six. That is ROI, so I gotta add 2 decimals. So it's actually 600% is our return on investment. So for every dollar of investment, I'm making $600. If you can find a company like that, let me know. Okay? I don't know what, I don't know of any company in my life that I know of that has that kind of ratio. But that's what it is. And you can see they're doing very well on what? They have very few assets. And they're doing a lot in sales. So, who do you think in today's world might have this kind of ratio? I can only think of one. Apple, iPhone, possibly, would have this kind of ratio. All right. And we already talked about return on investment. What does it mean? Every dollar invested, we make, in this case, $600. So every dollar invested in an asset, we make 600. And why is the company's ROI so much higher than a typical manufacturer? And it's very few assets. If I can make that asset number smaller, my return on investment should go up, right? And one of the first recommendations to improve performance, get rid of unused assets. And think of what GM did. They closed, look at Port Janesville, right? They closed a lot of plants. They were bleeding badly. Their first operation was to get rid of plants. They're doing it again. They're not making any cars, right? Or reducing the number of cars that they're making in the U.S. So a lot of Ohio plants are being shuttered to get rid of those assets. You have to. If you're not going to use them, you got to get rid of them. Otherwise, again, you'll just bleed. All right. Any thoughts or questions? So far, the computations are very easy, but the meaning has to be understood also. Well, if not, let's take our first break here, guys. I'll stop my recording and we'll pick up when we get back. On page 599, the author wants us to know that there are advantages to the ROI number. Please know this for the exam. And the list here is it encourages managers to look at all aspects of our company, our sales, our expenses, our investments, all at one number, which is nice. So it's very concise. What we can do is focus on asset or cost efficiency and asset efficiency in helping to improve our performance, right? So obviously to get a larger ROI number, what do? You cut costs, reduce assets. And certainly that's what any company will do to improve their ROI. Cut costs. One of the big and easiest ways to do that is with layoffs, right? But reduce assets is obviously selling your unused equipment. So again, easy to do in practice, not so easy to do because when you're talking about layoffs, that's when people get hurt. So there are disadvantages to ROI. We've had this myopic behavior, I think, in another chapter. and that is myopic behavior means looking only at the short term, not considering the long-term effects of a company. I can get rid of a lot of assets, right? I can sell a lot of equipment pretty easily, but what happens when I want to increase my sales? It's going to be harder to do with fewer assets. So there is a benefit and disadvantage to this look of using one number for our performance evaluation. So as an example, can I have you, if you're following along, go to page 601 of our book. At the bottom of the page, there's like 5 bullet points. So here's a manager in trouble. Her ROI is not being hit. She needs to get it higher quickly in the last quarter. And what does she do? She lays off the 5 highest paid employees. Is there a problem with laying off your 5 highest paid employees?
Other than they're the longest and the most beneficial.
Yeah, and what, they have a lot of experience, right? So it may not be in the long term good to do that. In the short term, it's fine. You'll get your profits up in the short run. What else does she do? Cut ad budget. That will certainly reduce expenses. Again, that'll improve my operating income. It will also improve my ROI. But is that a good decision? Short term, maybe. Long term, no. Reduce maintenance. By 75%. Again, long term, not a good decision in some cases. WPS tried to do this with the Pulliam plant, and then they had an explosion because they weren't doing the right maintenance on their boilers. So that's some of the risk again, that short myopic behavior that is a disadvantage to looking at one number. So just be aware of those occurrences. All right. Next, residual income. Begins on page 602. Similar to ROI. It's now considered the difference between income and the minimum dollar return required on the company's assets. So the formula is right here. Residual income is taking our operating income, our profits, minus the minimum rate of return on our assets, which is the rate times the assets. Here's our example. Example 2, page 603. Here's our income, 48,000, operating income, right? We have assets of beginning and ending. And the answer to that is 300,000. That's the average assets. And we then get 0.12, which is the minimum rate of return. So in this case, I have a positive $12,000 of residual income. So if my residual income is positive, they are doing a great job. I'm making more profit than the 12% required. If the residual income is negative, it's not good, right? The company is not making the desired rate of return on the investment. So negative is not good. Positive is good. So let's try a problem here. 29. Exercise 29, page 634. Again, it's pretty straightforward computation. For RI, we take our income minus our minimum rate of return for this problem is what?
9%?
Yeah, 9%, right? Thanks, Carla. 9%, very good. Times our average operating assets of 1.9 million. What's 9% of 1.9?
171,000.
So I'm going to have a negative.
34,600.
Great, Michaela, thank you. 34.6 negative residual income. So is this company doing well?
No.
No. So this company is doing poorly. Now, are they still making a profit? And the answer is yes, right? They're still making $136,400. So it's not like they're in terrible shape. But what does the company want to make is what's the problem. The company wants to make 9% of their investment, which is 1.9 million, and that lends itself to be 171,000. So that's the income level that we want to hit for this particular residual income to be positive. So now there is a relationship between residual income and return on investment. Was the ROI greater than or less than 9%? And the answer is less than. So what does that mean? That means when this is negative, the ROI is below the 9%. How can I say that again? Let's try this again. Residual income is negative. The company ROI is less than the required ROI, which in this case was the 9%. So if the residual income is negative, the ROI must be lower than the required ROI. We can say the opposite. If it's positive, if RI is positive, means that the company ROI is greater than the required ROI. And what is the ROI for this company? How do I figure this out now? What two numbers do I divide to get the actual number here? I know it's below 9%, but how do I get the actual number? Or what is
The
the?
operating income,
Yep.
136,400.
Over?
The average operating assets, the
Yep.
190.
1,900,000, right? So what is that number?
Mm,
7%?
Yeah, 0.171789.
7 point,
0.07. Oh, well, yeah, 7.1718. We just round it there.
which is obviously less than the 9. That's the required was 9. They're only at 7.18. So you're the manager. What are you going to do to get the ROI up or residual income up? What do we have to do? What's one thing we can do here? What are we going to do? What's one thing we can do? We have to do. Reduce cost, right? Which means possible layoffs. No Packer tickets. Right? Cut advertising. No purchases, right, of assets, of equipment of any sort, right? So those are obviously one thing. What else can we do? What's number 2? It's probably easier on personnel. What did GM do? Close plants, reduce assets, right? That will also make the residual income or ROI better for this particular company. If I can have a smaller number here, right? I can make that number smaller, my ratio is going to go up. All right. let's look at 32 yet. This is what's nice about these ratios now, is I can compare between two divisions how the managers are doing for each division. So in this case, we've got Adams at 605, Jefferson at 315. Just looking at, and then total capital employed, 4 million for Adams, 3.25 million for Jefferson. Just looking at those two numbers, which division is doing better without doing any ratios. Is it Adams or Jefferson? If you're looking at the financials of these two, which one's better? Adams. Yeah, I think Adams is a little bit better than Jefferson. So let's look at it. So residual income, we got to take our 605,000 for Adams. Minus a percentage of, what's the desired ending or rate of return in 32? 8%. Yeah, 8%. Thank you, Carla. Excellent. So 0.08 times the capital employed, which was 4 million. Yeah. Multiply that out. It's 605 minus
32, 320.
320. We have a positive residual income of $285. Yeah. Okay, let's look at Jefferson. Same scenario. Take our income, 315,000. Times its operating assets of 3.25 million. Gives me 315,000 minus what?
260.
260? And that gives us residual income of 65,000.
55.
Oh, I didn't carry the one, did I, Brianna? Rats. $55 versus $285. Which manager is doing better? And Adams, right? Making the most money based on their assets, right? They're both making money. They're both making more than the 8%, right? So both positive, but again, the larger the number, the better. So in this case, Adams is doing a much better job as far as managing the assets. They're getting more return on their asset investment. Okay. Now, I'm going to jump to 42, problem 42. This problem that we're looking at here is very similar to your 25-point problem. So I want to take a look at this. We'll start it today. We're not going to finish it, obviously. So let's look at what's happening here. This company is looking at adding 2 new products, an air conditioner product or a turbocharger product. We're trying to decide whether or not we should do it or not. Should we do one, do both, or do neither? So let's look at the air conditioner's return on investment. Its ROI is 90,000, income is 90,000. Its investment is 750,000. Gives me an ROI of some number, which is
12%.
12%. Not bad. Pretty good. Then we look at the turbocharger. I'm not sure why they come up with 82,080. I'm sure it's to get the ratio to come out somehow. 82,080 divided by 540,000. What is that?
15.2%.
14.2?
15.
15.2. So which 2 of these products should we be making?
The turbocharger?
The turbo, right? You're making the most percentage on your investment. So certainly. Now, what the author has us do here, I know it's a long process. We have 4 different scenarios. I can just add the air conditioners. I can just add the turbochargers. I can add both, right? Or I can do neither. Those are the 4 different scenarios. If I do neither investment, in other words, just go with the flow, my return on investment is 15%. So all I did was I divided, right, the income by the assets. So here's what the author would like us to do for the other 3 scenarios, is recompute the income with the air conditioner. So now I'm starting here. What's the income for the air conditioner line, or with the air conditioner line? I'm adding 90,000. So I'm adding $90,000 of income to my 4.335 million, and I get
4,425,000.
yes. You got it, Allison. And the same thing with the assets. I'm going to take my original 28,900,000, add 750.
29,650.
29,650 gives me what?
14.9.
So if I'm a manager, I was at 15. I take on the air conditioning line, and now my ROI, just by the air conditioning line being added, drops to 14.9. If you were paid on the ratio would you consider adding the air conditioner line?
You said
So-
no, because it's still down?
Yeah, it fell down just by adding the line. I didn't do anything. I was at 15, now I'm at 14.9. So that's the crux of ROI. It's telling me not to do the project. All right, let's look at the turbocharger. Going back to the original, income, 4,335,000. I add the the $82,080 to it. I came up with,
4,417,80.
yeah, we gotta mess around with that $80 at the end. And then the same is true of the assets. I was at 28,900,000. I'm gonna add the 540. I'm now at 29,440.
That's 15%.
And if you expand your decimal locations, it's like,
0, 0. Oh.
it does eventually get there. So
Mine
you,
is 15,0036.
I just guessed at 2. So, what did you get?
I got .150036.
So 4 here then?
No, I mean, well, there's 2 zeros in between that.
Oh, 2 zeros.
Yeah, that's why I said 15 even. And then it went 3-6, so it would be a 4, yeah.
There we go. Little practice in rounding too, isn't it? Right? There we go. 15 point. Now it's not a big change, but it is a change in which direction? Up, right? And if you look at what we're getting, right? 15.2% versus where are we? We're at the 15. That does increase the overall ROI. And if we did both, so now we got to add 2 incomes, the 90 and the 82 together. Plus the original 4,335,000. I should get 4.507 million. We got the $80 to play with. And then we do the same thing on the assets. So now I'm adding both assets, 750,000 plus the 540,000 plus the original 28,900,000. I get 30,190,000. Do a new ratio. Yep, 14.93. A little better than the original one, that being over here. A little better than the 14.9, but still not as good as we were. So of the 4 scenarios, which will the manager pick?
Just the turbo, or with
Yeah,
turbo?
just turbo, right? Just the turbo. Based on the ROI. All right, so now we use the ROI in our decision. Guess what? Now they want us to use the residual income as a measurement tool to decide whether or not we should do this. Now I'm going to do, this is on your page already submitted. If we did nothing, My residual income is, I'm just going to take this 14% times the 28,900,000 and subtract it from our 4,335,000. I get 289. My math right there, guys? Someone verify, please. 0.14 times 0.89. I think I'm okay. Guys at home, are we okay? Are my numbers right? Thank you, Michaela. Thank you, Carla. Awesome. All right. And the residual process is very similar to the ROI. So if we just added the air conditioner, I'm going to take my 4.335 million of profit. I'm going to add 90,000. I get 4.425. I'm going to subtract 14% of. We started with 28,000,009. I'm going to add the 750. $29,650.
So we're just taking the numbers we found out the first time and moving them over?
Yeah, basically. Yep. Just doing another analysis of the same information. Times 14%, I get 4,151,000. So my residual income is $274,000. That 274 is not as good as 289. So right now the air conditioner is still out. So now I'm going to look at the turbocharger. I'm just taking the income levels that we had before. 14% of, what's that asset number? I'm adding 540 to 28.9. Should be 29,440. I'm up to 295,480. That looks pretty good. That's better than where we were, right? And then both together, someone have this 14% number? $4 million something? All right, which is the best choice here, guys? Should we stay the same? Should we do something
turbo.
different? Just the turbo again, right? So in this instance, based on 14% required minimum rate of return, we still come up with the same answer, just a turbo. Now, there is a possibility that a return on investment ratio and residual income will give you two different answers. So be ready for that. They want you to do this residual income all over again, using, instead of the 14%, they want you to use 12. So for problem 42,
Next one says 10%.
or 10, I'm sorry, 10 instead of 14. 10 is the percentage that they want us to use over there. So that you can do on your own. I do believe I have the answer key for this, so I will copy it in. We can pick up here then on Thursday, if the snow allows us to get here, and finish here. I will also talk on Thursday about the 25-point problem in CML. Somewhat similar to this, but we haven't gotten through enough of our ratios yet to do our project. All right, that's it for today, guys. Have a great day left. Enjoy it. Be safe.